All right, we can let the music go, and welcome to the show. I'm Dennis Prager. Welcome indeed. Thank you for being with me. A lot to talk to you about. Do you know that Nancy Pelosi, after meeting with Donald Trump, the President of the United States, yesterday, spoke about his lack of masculinity? We have the exact quote here? I have the exact quote. Whoa, that is special. It's like a manhood thing for him. Pelosi told Democrats, of Trump's wall obsession, according to the source, as if manhood could ever be associated with him. Now, why is this not well known? Why? Can you name me a tweet of the president that is as ugly as that? What if he were to say, after meeting with her, you know, her opposition to the wall, it's a femininity thing. She lacks femininity. Because the feminine is protective, and she's not protective. Can you imagine that? It's a manhood thing. The left has done this my whole life. I remember well those of us who were for a strong missile defense and for a strong military during the Cold War were accused of missile envy. It was a very common put-down of those who wanted a strong defense posture for the West generally and the United States specifically. Missile envy, which of course was a play on the Freudian concept of penis envy. And that it was also a manhood issue because lacking in the manhood and confidence in their manhood, Cold Warriors substituted missiles for their organs. The left are scummy and have always been. There's not liberals are not. Some are, obviously. Some conservatives are. But virtually all leftists are. This is how they think. This is how they talk. If they can destroy you by destroying anything about you, they will do so. They have out-Trumped Trump his entire life. The guy is a Boy Scout compared to the left when it comes to degrading your opponents. The Nancy Pelosi statement, which gets no attention, it's just no attention. I was stunned when I read it. It's a manhood thing for him, as if manhood could ever be associated with him. So may I say, as a pretty secure male, this guy radiates manhood. You may not like him, you may not appreciate him, you may not agree with him, but if there's one thing that is pretty clear to this male, this guy is secure in his manhood. This guy, and if manhood is guts, if manhood is conviction and strength, this guy has an excess of it. All right? And to be honest, I mean, I don't, because I never engage in the type of talk that Nancy Pelosi and the left does routinely. I will not tell you the names of people who radiate to me, men in Congress and the Senate, who radiate to me a lack of manhood. When you want to, I'll tell you one thing about manhood. When you seek to be loved by everybody, that is not manhood. All right? I'll be as specific as possible. Trump does not seek to be loved by everybody. And he is loved by his children, interestingly. Probably his wife, too. Well, that's not a little thing. If you're loved by your kids and you don't seek to be loved by the world, that's pretty manly to me. God, I wish I could name to you the names that are in my mind of Republicans who do not radiate manhood. Oh, it's painful because it's so clear to me they're wimpy. But I won't because it's not right to do. And the Democrats How can we be loved? How can we buy more votes? That's manly. And of course, I don't think most people associate femininity with many left-wing women. I'm not going to say any names. Just thought that it's an appropriate comment in light of what Nancy Pelosi said. I am stunned that she would meet with him and then make such a statement afterwards. It's so literally below the belt. But they get away with it because the press, which is a despicable, right now it's truly a despicable vocation for most involved in it. This is what they do. Michael Cohen is just sentenced to 36 months in prison. For what, though?
Well, that's not totally...
It's not totally clear yet. Well, I'm going to be talking to an expert on campaign finance laws. The absurdity of just the absurdity and the use of the government to suppress a politician that you don't agree with. It's just, we're living through very difficult times, very difficult. In England, I will read to you what is happening in England about I will read to you the definition of a hate crime. The truly deep writer Theodore Dalrymple, a psychiatrist in Britain, now living in France, we've had him on the show, writing in City Journal, has offered the latest definition in Britain of a hate crime. And he correctly describes it as Kafkaesque. If you don't understand the damage the left is doing to the world, you don't understand the world in which we live. Every single day, I bring you examples. But the Nancy Pelosi statement, there are two things that are worthy of very important note. Is that she said it, and that the press has not made at all a big deal about it. Can you imagine if he had tweeted, the president, or said after their meeting, that woman does not radiate femininity? Can you imagine? It'd be the biggest news item in the United States of America and in much of the Western world. But she says that he can't be associated with manhood? Nothing. 1-8-PRAGER 776-877-243 776. There was this big article on loneliness in America. How there's a big article. It's really an epidemic in the United States, especially among people over 50. The number of lonely Americans is a tragedy. It's an epidemic. It's the greatest amount of loneliness in American history, according to this report. And let's see, do I have it? No, this is not the one. I gotta just give you the source here. Okay, let's see. And Pelosi mocks president's manhood. Oh yes, I got to talk to you about the terror attack. Aging alone it's from the Wall Street Journal. The loneliest generation. Americans more than ever are aging alone. Aging, we're talking over 50. Loneliness is as much a killer as 15 cigarettes a day, according to this, among the examples that it gave. Now, why do you think that is? Why is my generation, the baby boomer generation, the loneliest generation of Americans ever? Ever. Well, I have a line for you from that article. Among the most likely to lack close kin are college-educated women. We'll be back. I'm Dennis Prager. You know, I have talked about the micro as much as the macro. It's one of the few. I'm not saying it's better. I'm just stating a fact, not a praise, but it's one of the few national talk shows that talks about politics and the personal in equal proportions. And this is precisely the sort of thing that I would talk about, warn about indeed. Wall Street Journal, The Loneliest Generation, Americans more than ever are aging alone. The aging, I think, here is over 50, certainly over 60. And they have nobody in their lives. I told you my generation is the most screwed up, except that they are raising another generation, which will emulate my generation. It's the most narcissistic generation. Narcissists tend to get lonely. I'm not saying everybody who's lonely is a narcissist. Please, and even my heart breaks even for the narcissists. But think about it. What exactly enables you to have people in your life? Family and religion, right? And my generation was taught by the left, who taught us, a woman without a man is like a fish without a bicycle. So I read to you, not read to you, I actually published what a woman said on this show, on the Male-Female Hour a few weeks ago. Today is the Male-Female Hour, it's Wednesday. Where she simply said, I followed feminism and it was a terrible mistake. I got 4 college degrees and I'm quite successful in my professional life. She was 50 years old, and I go home to a couple of dogs and cats. Another victory for the left. Remember, leftists are unhappy, and they believe that misery loves company. If Paul Krugman is happy, then I do not read the human condition properly. Just an example. I'm not even criticizing him. He's a columnist for the New York Times who just radiates anger and unhappiness. But the whole left is anger and unhappiness. And usually over nothing. It's an astonishing thing because it's an empty life. It's very hard to be affluent, and by affluent I don't mean millionaire, just affluent. The average American, compared to the rest of humanity, is affluent. Affluent and secular is a danger. What's going to give you meaning in life? For most of the people on the left, meaning in life is attacking the United States in its moral foundations, attacking white people now, attacking cisgender males, attacking Christianity, and the like. And of course, attacking conservatives. But anyway, my generation was raised, especially the women, you don't need a man. You need a career. And somehow career doesn't tend to fill the loneliness problem, the hole of loneliness. At least people in the past had religion, so they'd go to church, they'd have a built-in community. Also, women were more likely to volunteer. You made friends through the volunteer work that you did, often religious, not only religious, or the book club that you were a member of. But no, there's no time for that because everybody's pursuing profession. So in this huge article in the Wall Street Journal, here's the one line I took out for you. Among the most likely to lack close kin are college-educated women. Sending your daughter to college, my friends, is about the most destructive thing you could do to most girls and boys, by the way. As I always say, whether it's a son or a daughter, but it does more damage to the girls. And as I always say, it's playing Russian roulette with their values. Yes, I ask these young women I meet all the time, at whatever function or on an airplane even. So if you could be guaranteed a great career or a great marriage, which guarantee would you take? Doesn't mean you can't have the other one, I explain. But only one is guaranteed. It's amazing the ones who say career, the number of those who say career, and the more prestigious the college, the more likely they are to say career. Yeah, that'll do it. Yes. Family, any man who advocates family, or woman for that matter, read the reactions to the article I published 2 weeks ago on this, what the women who called into the male-female hour said. That means you are advocating that women be barefoot and pregnant. That's how you are dismissed. So guess who are the loneliest, according to this? College-educated women. Not a shock to me. Told you college. College makes you, unless you have very strong values, or you're in a department that has no political aim, which is rarer and rarer today, you will, in fact, become less intelligent and less happy having gone to college. Yep, that's right. You'll become angrier. You will become emptier. College, for most young people today, is an utterly negative experience, though they don't know it. They will later. Life is a marathon. So you think when you're young and you're desirable, male or female, but especially female, because it's unfair the way it works in that way, but that does work in that way. The task in life is to see reality, not wish it away. And because you get no wisdom, because religion is dead, so where are you going to understand what telling a 20-year-old, at 55, you may not like these decisions. You might as well say, when you visit Neptune, it may not work out. 55 for a 20-year-old doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. Most don't think that way. 1-8-PRAGER-776. This is the Dennis Prager Show. All right, everybody, I do want to remind you that I'm raising funds for the Salvation Army. From the bottom of my heart, I love that organization. It's a throwback to days of greater innocence in America, where doing good is what mattered. There's a banner at my website. We are over half our way, just above half our way to our goal. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. You are listening to the Dennis Prager Show. I was apprised last night of a book for kids that I'm going to read from later. It truly encapsulates my theories about there being no area. That's a very big part of how the left operates in the world. There's no area that they leave alone. There's a children's book. It's for 2-year-olds called A is for Activist. Were you aware of this book prior to yesterday? Yeah. Did you read it? Yes. Do you read it to your nephews and nieces and stuff? I got to get a video of you doing this. A is for active. I'm sorry? I didn't read it. No. I was a joke. I hope that the audience is aware of that. In fact, as we speak, I am buying it. That is my devotion to this show is such that I am buying a book that I can't stand. What is the toll now in France? There was a terror attack. Do you know that this man? You know what the key part of this story is? He attacked a 16-year-old with a knife. He stabbed a 16-year-old with a knife and got 2 years in prison. He was arrested over 20 times. Forgetting the terror aspect, because he screamed Allahu Akbar, which they keep translating as, there are 2 errors in that translation. 3 dead already? And 13, and I'm sure some seriously. 5 in serious condition, yeah. Allahu Akbar. I studied Arabic for 3 years, so I love grammar. So just know Akbar is the greatest. It's not important. It's not insignificant, but just so you'll know, because they do is great. If it was great, it would be Kabir. But Akbar is the greatest. Anyway, the New York Times, oh boy, this must be 20 years ago. Until about 20 years ago, many of you do not know this. Some of you never knew this. If somebody shouted Allahu Akbar, we'll keep it as God is great. That's the way they generally translate it. It was always Allah is great. Then the New York Times, and therefore the rest of the herd, there is no herd like the media herd. None. That is correct. That is the mentality of 95% of the people in the media. If the New York Times reported, I will say it the same way. That's it. That's the way it works. New York Times decided that it would translate Allahu Akbar no longer as Allah is the greatest, but rather God is the greatest. And so what happens is, why did they do this? There were two huge reasons for doing this. One is to de-Islamicize Islamic terror. It's now religious terror. By the way, every report, makes no mention of Islamic. What they say is he was radicalized. That's it is phenomenon. It's a phenomenon. What is it? It's all jargon. And by the way, for those of you with a college education, I am not saying every Muslim is a terrorist. The idea is preposterous. I don't say preposterous things. You may not agree, but moronic, that would be moronic, okay? I avoid the moronic. No, and nobody thinks every Muslim is a terrorist or anywhere near every Muslim. Okay, so let's make that clear. But there is terror in the name of Islam. And you would not know it because the language of the Western media has de-Islamicized Islamic terror. He was radicalized, which means nothing. It could mean he became a radical, and you fill in any other, a radical what? A radical leftist, a radical rightist, a radical Jew, a radical Christian, a radical Hindu, anything, right? Radicalized means nothing. So that's one reason that they did Allahu Akbar is no longer God. Allah is great or the greatest, rather God. The other is it helps the left's narrative of getting rid of Western religion in Western life. The ultimate hatred of the left is toward Christianity and its much smaller ally, Judaism. That's the agenda of the left. Last night at a Christmas party for those who work for Prager University, I spoke about the way in which I fully understand what is going on. God made order, the left hates it. It's as simple as that. The most obvious arena is male-female. It is repeated in Genesis 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. Not in every one of those chapters, but in the first chapters of Genesis. Over and over, God created Adam. Adam is the human being. Or even better, the man, the Adam. There's a difference between Adam and the Adam, but I'm not going to talk about that now. Male and female, he created them. Everything is tampered with, everything, and destroyed. It is a completely destructive force, leftism. Not liberalism. Liberals are weak. Liberals are misguided because they think that their enemy is conservatism when it is leftism. But liberalism is not the issue, leftism is. This man, so why do I mention this? How could you be given 2 years in prison for stabbing a kid. Why isn't that sick? Why isn't that morally corrupt? Why do people put up with this? And I'll tell you why. Because the left owns the moral dialogue. That's why. Or there's no dialogue. The left owns the moral monologue. And that monologue, the progressive monologue, is you don't punish bad people. You punish Michael Cohen. You punish the President of the United States. You punish, what was it, General Kelly?
General
Flynn. Why I always get Kelly and Flynn, the names mixed. General Flynn, what was done to him, I am embarrassed as an American, and that it takes a lot for me to be embarrassed as an American, on what was done to a man who gave his life to the United States of America. That's because the left lives by those who are merciful to the cruel will be cruel to the merciful. That is the motto of the left. That is what they do. They destroy decent people's lives, and they are sympathetic to the cruel. Why should we put a person in prison for more than 2 years for stabbing someone? Beto O'Rourke, who I predict will be the Democratic nominee, they think of him as Robert Kennedy and Barack Obama rolled in one, and chills go up their legs on the left. Beto O'Rourke has said, look, it's obvious we have to change the rules of incarceration. Too many blacks are in prison. So there are two possibilities, correct, for why there are too many blacks in prison. Only two possibilities. The society wishes to imprison because of its inherent racism, or racism is in our DNA, as Barack Obama said. But of course, he didn't divide. Only Donald Trump divides. Well, that is one possibility. The other is disproportionate number of black males commit violent crime. Those are your two possibilities, right? Racism or facts. Now, if the facts are not the facts, if black males do not engage in a disproportionate amount of crime, then it's racism. Anyway, they don't believe in incarceration for bad people, as minimal as possible. 1-8-PRAGER-776. Abolitionist, actively answering call to actions, is a children's book that I became aware of yesterday, and I actually bought it now on Kindle so that I could read parts for you. E is for equal rights, black, brown, or white. Clean and healthy is right. Every place we live and play, environmental justice is the way. Environmental justice for 3-year-olds. There you go. It means nothing.
Right, they don't know what
None of this means anything. Wait till I get to the F. F is for feminist, for fairness in our pay. Fairness in our pay. You have to understand. And I stake my credibility on this. Either they're lying or I'm lying, and in this case I use the L word, lying. Of course, women get the same pay, but if they do the exact same work, overwhelmingly, the gap is, and it's even liberal political scientists and economists have noted this. It's because men will work longer hours, or men will work a harder shift, and women want to have a more balanced life. So they don't work as many hours generally in the same job because they want to take care of a home. And because they are not, most women are not as obsessive about career advancement, although that's changing. That's changing because if you believe that all your eggs go into the career basket, you better succeed there, or life is pretty meaningless. F is for feminist, for fairness in our way, for freedom to flourish and choose our own way. Guess what G is for? If you guess what G is for, either of you, I will give you money. Global warming. That was a very good choice. It is not the case. Mr. Producer, what is G for? You guys could throw out all the words you want. They're thinking, gender neutrality? That's good. No, maybe you should write a kid's book. You know what? We should write a kid's book with our values. G is for God, without whom life is ultimately meaningless and you're just a coincidence of molecules, and have a great day, kid. That's what I should do a kid's book on the alphabet.
You do have a book on the 10 Commandments.
I have a book on the 10 Commandments for kids. That was good, the G one. Anyway, you want to know their G? Of course, God doesn't make an appearance in this. It's a left-wing book. G is for grassroots. Now, if there's a word that a 2-year-old should know, it is grassroots. Sprouting from below, sharing nutrients and the water's flow. Below the surface, we're all connected. Stronger together, we grow. All right. E. If you don't know the E, guys, I'm gonna ask you to take a course in leftism. What is the E for? Exactly. Equal rights. Black, brown, or white. Clean and healthy is right. Every place we live and play, environmental justice is the way. It would be fun. How would you feel if you met a 3-year-old who memorized these little rhyming ditties? Be a little scary, no? All right, what's next? I did E already. That's right. H is for healthy food, a human right. All right. Oh, I. Indigenous and immigrant. Together we stand all. Our histories are relevant. An injury to one is an injury to all. J is for justice. Yay for justice. Jia, jang, jang. Juanita Jamal. Justice for the janitors. Justice for all. That's right. This is what kids were raised on a generation before me. That's what they got instead of this. Because they thought it was good to have kids laugh. Get the idea, girls? All right, D-I-Day. D-I diggy die, D-O-do diggy die do, D-U-do diggy die do do. That's a lot better than this. Never was this more appropriate, I have to say, in the history of this show. All right, Jay, all right, thank you. J is for justice. Okay, 1-8-PRAGER-776. All right, let's see. What is the next one? Oh, L. Guys, you know L. L is LGBTQ. Love who you choose, because love is true. Liberate your notions of limited emotions. Celebrate with pride our links of devotion. That's fascinating. Liberate your notions of limited emotions. That's quite a message. Okay. M is for megaphones and marching. N is for no, 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 no. Yes to what we want, no to what must go. No, no, no. The kids in the picture are angry. Isn't that a beautiful message? I mean, think about this. Oh, boy. P, peace march. Protest. Power to the people. That's beautiful. right? R is for radical Reds. The headline said, ruinous rioters, the rumor spread. Rabble-rousing riffraff. Really? Well, there is no area where they don't enter. I'm Dennis Prager. We continue.
The Dennis Prager Show.
Is given by Professor Philip Hamburger, Professor of Law at Columbia University. And this course is Who Are the Most Powerful People in America? And I wish we could have instant feedback from listeners to know what it is you think the answer to that question is. Whom do you think are the most powerful people in America? Here is the beginning of Professor Hamburger's video.
If someone suggested to you that Americans should reject representative government and return to the rule of kings, you would laugh. This is America, you would say. In our revolution, we got rid of monarchy. And of course you'd be right, but only to a point. Monarchy is making a comeback, though not in the way you think. Let me explain. A king is one person. Get rid of him, and you might get your freedom back. But what do you do when the nation has come to be controlled by thousands of little kings, almost supreme in their specialized fiefdoms, who have vast power over your life, much as a king might?
Okay,
Good question.
That's a great beginning. And Professor Hamburger, congratulations on a wonderful course.
Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure to do it, and thanks for having me on your show.
Oh, thanks. Thanks go all around then. Sir, who are the little kings? We got rid of a big one king, but we have a lot of little kings. Who are they?
Well, in one agency after another, and there are more than dozens, hundreds of them across this country, state and federal, we have bureaucrats who make so-called rules, which are substitutes for laws. And so instead of being governed by laws made by our representatives in Congress or in the state legislature, we end up being governed, I'm afraid, by little bureaucrats, so-called experts, who are largely unaccountable to us. They're certainly not elected.
Give an example, if you would, of a law that a bureaucrat would pass.
Well, there are so many examples. Congress, just take one familiar example, adopted the Clean Air Act, and all sorts of rules regulate us, not because they were specified by Congress, but rather because that statute authorizes the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, to make rules that govern us in our everyday lives. And of course, those bureaucrats are less responsive to us and our needs and our knowledge and our expertise than would be congressmen. And of course, it's not just those formal rules, but also agency interpretations and guidance also function as modes of governance. So we have layers and layers of administrative power that have substituted themselves for governance by law.
Is this new in American history?
Well, it's new-ish. In the late 19th century, progressives, Woodrow Wilson and his ilk, were disappointed, I'm afraid. They were not against popular suffrage, but they didn't like the results. And so what they ended up doing was proposing a mode of governance that would be in the hands of folks who were of the same class, very much like them, educated Americans. And that's not an argument against education, of course, on the contrary, but we all have a right to vote. And the danger is that the right to vote is, in a sense, undermined by the power of the bureaucracy. voting is a way of taking into account the diversity of the nation and our different preferences and ideas. And rulemaking by experts narrows the group that actually has input into the process.
I'm sitting here, it's I don't know how to react emotionally, depressed or angry. You're laying this out so clearly. I just suspect that the average American has not thought of this.
Right. We've become accustomed to it. And I think in an odd way the Supreme Court is to blame. The Supreme Court has legitimized all of this. And in the process, as courts usually do, they say, well, things haven't changed that much. We're not making a great big change in the Constitution. And as a result, there was very little notice that actually this was happening, although in retrospect, it's an entirely new mode of government, sort of an administrative state, a command state within the Constitution's United States of America and within our government. And it's very disturbing. Actually, the voting rights issue is in some ways the most disturbing element. If you think of it...
All right, forgive me, Professor. We're going to come back to that. We have to take a break. That's the only way we have a show. And make your known... This week's course at Prager University, who are the most powerful people in America. This is, I would argue, perhaps this is the most important subject that is never covered. And that's why we're covering it, and I salute Professor Hamburger, who has started an organization with regard to this. But first, let me, Professor, just bring people up to speed that a massive number of laws are passed without Americans' input. In other words, we don't have Congress make these laws, but the bureaucrats make these laws. The example that he gave is so clear. You have a Clean Air Act, and in the Clean Air Act, Congress says, and the Environmental Agency will then make sure that we have clean air, or something to that effect. Did I get that right, Professor?
More or less, yes.
And they will then pass every law they want, or every statute, or every rule, but the American people never voted on it. So now, this is interesting. I can't predict what you'll say. What about voting rights were you about to say?
Well, if you look at the history of American law since the Civil War, there are two main developments. One is the development of equal suffrage, voting rights for blacks, for women, and then really for blacks in the 1960s. That's a process that's taken more than a century. And over the same time, curiously, there's been another major development, and the other major development is administrative power, the power of these bureaucrats. And so the question is, are they connected? And the answer is, by all means. Woodrow Wilson, who's sort of the granddaddy of administrative power in this country, said, I'm quoting him, these aren't my words, "The reformer is bewildered by the need to persuade a voting majority of several million heads. And he's particularly worried about diversity. He says, the reformer has difficulty influencing the mind not of Americans with only stock only, but also of Irishmen, of Germans, of Negroes." And he says that in order to get a footing for a new doctrine, one must influence minds cast in every mold of race, inheriting every bias of environment, warped by the histories of score different nations, warmed or chilled, closed or expanded by almost every climate of the globe. In other words, he was worried about diversity. And administrative power was a way of allowing people like him to say, yes, we want equal voting rights, but we don't trust the results, so we're going to withdraw legislative power into the hands of our own class. Now, I don't think administrative power these days is as racist in that sense anymore. But when you withdraw legislative power out of the hands of those elected by diverse people, it's not going to be sympathetic or accommodating to the needs of minorities. And so the issue is still with us.
Right, but I don't think, at least I don't resonate to the notion that minorities do not have equal rights in the country.
Well, no, but if you think about it, a religious minority can easily talk to a congressperson and get some relief from laws that grate against their sensibilities. In contrast, one cannot persuade so easily someone at HHS. And this was one of the problems with the Affordable Care Act, so-called Obamacare. Obamacare left a lot of regulation to be done not by Congress, but by the agencies, by the IRS, of goodness gracious, and HHS. And as a result, many churches and religious institutions found that they didn't have a sympathetic ear when they talked to the government anymore, because they weren't talking to folks that got elected. And in that sense, I think administrative power has social costs that go beyond what is ordinarily understood. It really is it undermines equal voting rights and is a threat to civil liberties in the most profound sense.
So what have you started to combat this?
Well, in my frustration with administrative power, I realized that it's really a civil liberties issue. And there is now a new civil liberties movement to deal with the loss of rights, including all sorts of procedural rights. And to this end, I started something called the New Civil Liberties Alliance. It's located in Washington, alas, but that's where the lawyers are. And we pick up where the ACLU leaves off. We litigate to defend speech rights, jury rights, due process rights, all the things that need to be defended against the administrative state. And so I encourage people to come to our website and see what we're doing.
Well, we've put it up at DennisPrager.com, but you're certainly free to mention the website directly. What is it? It's
at ncla.legal, ncla.legal. Forgive me, I've got a cold. But NCLA sounds like a basketball team, but in fact, we're a group of lawyers fighting for civil liberties.
And again, it's up at DennisPrager.com for my listeners' sake.
Thank you.
No, it's so important. Is another term for the administrative state the deep state?
That's interesting, isn't it? I think it's a reference to a different one aspect of a sort of a multi-layered problem. When there's so much power in a bureaucracy, one power is that it asserts itself against the president, and that's the problem of the deep state. The more common legal problem, the threat to civil liberties in a more direct sense, is that it's administrative power, a power by which the executive commands Americans as if they were in a military organization rather than governing them by law. So these are aspects of a related problem. It's the problem of having so many bureaucrats with power. But deep state, I think, refers to the tensions between the administrators and the elected government, as opposed to
and essentially, Professor, it would seem to me it's almost irrelevant who the president is. They just continue doing what they want to do. I'll have your response.
They do have a point of view.
I'm sorry?
They do have a point of view, don't they?
Yes, one. That's right. They do have a point of view. It's impossible to overstate how important this is and how it undermines democracy and values, certainly, that those of us who believe in the American experiment of liberty believe in. Professor Philip Hamburger's course is up at DennisPrager.com. We continue. Hi, everybody. Dennis Prager. By the way, my guest, whom I have not had the honor of meeting, the living martyr has, when he was videoed in New York, I presume. My guest, Philip Hamburger, is a professor of law at Columbia University. And we have something in common that I just realized because I love names. Hamburger means from Hamburg, and Prager means from Prague. So there you go. My ancestors come from Prague, and yours from Hamburg.
Actually, funnily enough, our family, we're Jewish, and the Jewish Hamburgers come from a little town called Hammelburg. I think we were burgers of ham. So we came from a place with dirt streets, not paved, I'm afraid.
Oh, well, my ancestors...
I'm glad you attribute to us our Bain background.
I'm going to ask my brother. He knows the family better, whether we came from paved streets or not. I never thought of that. So you have started this. I have one final question for you, and that is, how do your fellow academics at Columbia react to you?
Well, I'm very grateful to be at Columbia. I confess, when I came here, I thought it would not be a sympathetic location. But in fact, they've been very civil, and although I cannot say that they agree with me, it's a remarkably civilized place, the law school, that is. I can't speak for the rest of the university. But yeah. I've had no difficulties on this account, although I can't say that they really appreciate the point of view.
Well, do you have 3 allies in the law school?
I describe myself as the only out-of-the-closet conservative, which is not to say that I'm that conservative or even that I try to bring any of my conservative ideas into class. I try rather just to open up questions rather than preach any point of view.
Wait, I just want to relish that for a moment. The only out-of-the-closet conservative at Columbia Law School.
So far as I can tell, that's right.
Are you familiar with Amy Wax?
I am, yes.
She's a professor of law at the University of Pennsylvania.
Yes, and in fact, I gave an introduction to Paul Levy when he received an award from ACTA for standing up for speech rights at Pennsylvania. So I think he did a good job in standing up for her speech rights. I thought that was admirable.
Well, sir, again, it's an honor to have you on the Prager University faculty.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome. Again, this is a very important, I can't overstate its importance. The country is run, in effect, by people who were never elected. And they pass laws that govern your life and my life with relish. The bureaucrats. The name of the course is Who Are the Most Powerful People in America? Thank you, Professor Hamburger. I'm Dennis Prager. Please donate to the Salvation Army at my banner.
If someone suggested to you that Americans should reject representative government and return to the rule of kings, you would laugh. This is America, you would say. In our revolution, we got rid of monarchy. And of course you'd be right, but only to a point. Monarchy is making a comeback, though not in the way you think. Let me explain. A king is one person. Get rid of him, and you might get your freedom back. But what do you do when the nation has come to be controlled by thousands of little kings, almost supreme in their specialized fiefdoms, who have vast power over your life, much as a king might? Good question, because that's what we're up against. This regime is called the administrative state. Its little kings are unelected bureaucrats, officially known as administrators, secretaries, or even czars. And make no mistake, they are very powerful. Their decisions affect us every day. The FDA, the FCC, the SEC, and so on and so on. Put together almost any 3 or 4 random letters, and chances are you've stumbled on a government agency. These agencies and the people in them shape our lives, often for the worse. Many farmers in California lost their livelihoods because the Fish and Wildlife Service decided that the Delta smelt, a tiny fish, was more important than the farmer's water supply. That decision may have been right or it may have been wrong. My point is simply that the decision should have been made by our lawmakers who are accountable to us at the next election. Those farmers are among the millions of hardworking people directly hurt by the administrative state. And many more millions have been indirectly hurt, such as all those discouraged from even starting a business by miles of bureaucratic red tape. This is not an argument against government regulation per se, but against regulation imposed by bureaucrats rather than by our elected lawmakers, whom we can hold accountable at the next election. Here's the larger danger. As bureaucracy grows, individual freedom diminishes. How do we get into this mess? And more importantly, how do we get out of it? America's founders recognized the problem. They didn't like being told what to do by people they hadn't voted for. They built all kinds of protections into the U.S. Constitution, starting with its very first line after the preamble. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. All legislative powers, not some. This means only Congress can make the nation's laws. Congress thus cannot divest itself of that power to a bureaucracy. And that's how America operated for most of its first 100 years. This changed when many Americans, such as Woodrow Wilson, fell in love with centralized bureaucratic power. Wilson was a university professor before he moved into politics and eventually became president in 1912. A self-described progressive reformer, he was impatient for power. He wasn't interested in persuading the American people to come over to his point of view. That would take too long. So instead, he aimed to shift lawmaking power out of Congress and into the hands of a professional class of government workers, in other words, bureaucrats. Franklin Roosevelt, who served in Wilson's cabinet, perfected his mentor's vision when he became president. For him, as for Wilson, there were few problems that administrative power couldn't solve. FDR's presidency produced an alphabet soup of new government programs that vastly expanded the administrative state, and since then it has grown even more dramatically. Congress still passes laws, but it leaves it to the bureaucracy to fill in the gaps, and these gaps can be enormous. Consider, for example, the Affordable Care Act of 2009, what came to be known as Obamacare. The bill itself was over 2,500 pages, but Congress left much unspecified, so career government officials, elected by no one, went to work. And by 2013, there were an additional 10,000 pages of regulations. So how do we rein in these faceless monarchs? First, Congress should actually do its job and take responsibility for the laws it passes. Don't hold your breath. But they at least could do this. Congress should end legal immunity for bureaucrats who abuse their power. If they know they can be sued, they'll be a lot more sober about imposing rules others have to live by. Second, the courts should do their job. They must follow the law. That means protecting our constitutional freedoms, including our right to representative government. No more bureaucratic rulemaking. And finally, we have to do our job. We must assert our freedom in conversation, on the web, and in the courts. We don't want to be ruled by a king or thousands of little kings. As the founders would have said, no regulation without representation. I'm Philip Hamburger, professor of law at Columbia Law School and president of the New Civil Liberties Alliance for Prager University. Thank you for watching this video. To help keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.